Wow, it's time for another show full of tips and ideas from the sales growth leadership expert, Dean Akers. Known for his experience in hyper-growing companies and creating cultures for high-performance teams, here's Dean.
Well, welcome to your Sales and Leadership Ninja Show. Again, I'm your head ninja, Dean Akers, and each week I bring you one of my rants to stimulate your thinking in a realm of sales and leadership. This week, I had several different instances that got me amped up on this week's rant. And I hear all the time, your prices aren't competitive, title of the show today. Well, we're not competitive. And I hear salespeople talk about price. And if you've listened to any other shows, you know I'm not a big price believer. And I've got enough experience in it to know that I'm spot on, at least in the businesses I've been in. So I want to share a couple of examples today that I want you to think about. And I just want you, when you're looking at your business this next week, or you're in sales this next week, think about your pricing strategies, because every dollar on 100 that you add into your price model adds 1% to the bottom line. It can make the difference between huge valuations on your company and being broke. So I got to share with you how this started. It started years ago, but I'll give you some specific examples. Back when I first got in the tire industry, we had a wholesale division. And these guys, our wholesale guys, were selling all over the state of Florida, and they were selling tires to these small dealers. And they were sitting there telling me, oh, we got to buy better, Dean. We got to buy better. These dealers need better pricing. They're dying. They need better pricing. And I went, wow. I said, well, okay, that's new to me, but, I'm new to the tire business. So I asked one of my wholesale guys if I could ride with him and go meet these dealers. So I rode around. In fact, we went up into the North Florida area, and we were meeting several different dealers, some with multiple locations. And so I sat there, and I was talking to them, and they were telling about price and margin and competitors and all this other stuff. And so I said, oh, okay. And then I saw something that was like a game-changing moment for me. A tire wholesaler dropped some tires off at one of the dealers we're seeing. And he got the invoice out, and he was priced it for a car. It was getting ready to go on. He leaned over and took his calculator, and he went choo-choo-choo-choo like they do, and they hit enter. And I go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm putting markup on my tire. I go, so do you always use markup? And he goes, oh, yeah, that's what we do. That's, we buy the tires and we mark it up. And I got in the car with my sales guy, and I said, we're killing these small dealers. And he goes, how do you figure? We got to sell them cheaper. So we did the math. We did markup on a $100 tire, and we did the same markup on a $105 tire we sold them. Well, now they were in the process of selling a tire using markup. They weren't selling the tire based on their price and trying to buy deeper for us to make better margin. So every dollar we reduced our wholesale cost impacted their margins tremendously. It would have been one thing if they were keeping our lower price against the standard price and using that to increase their margins, but they were all doing markup. It was so disconcerting, it got me out of the wholesale business. I said, I don't even have time to deal with this. The other funny thing is I was working with tire dealers back then, and we secret shopped their competitors. And these were some big competitors, the big statewide competitors. And they were pricing cheap on the TV. They were like, oh, this price is this, it's so cheap. And all these guys would go, look at how cheap they sell these tires. So I went out and secret shopped them, and I sat in their lobby after I bought some tires of some of the big competitors. And what I found was they used those tires, those big name brand tires, as loss leaders. And they would sell them if you actually came in. They would if you said, oh, I absolutely want that. They would sell it. They wouldn't fight you about it. But they would sit there and they would go, we have the tire you're interested in. Oh, by the way, today we have this tire. It's about $20 less, but it has 10,000 mile more warranty. And oh, by the way, it has free road hazard. And the people would look at it and go, man, they both good looking tires. You got more warranty and everything else. And I said, well, I'll buy that. Well, that was a lesser name tire that had huge margins in it when it was sold for the price that the consumer bought it for. So they were using loss leaders. They were using pricing strategies, which a lot of us don't do. Which brings up another story. I got asked to speak to a big hardware group about 25, 30 years ago. I don't remember how long it was. A big hardware convention, all independent hardware dealers. And they were all anxious. This was when Home Depot and Lowe's had first come out, and they were, Home Depot was sending flyers out. And so I was speaking on different things in sales, but a couple of the hardware groups reached out to me later, and I said, let me do some analysis. So what I did was we secret shopped. We got 10 of their items, and they were doing the same thing. They were doing markup to cost, just like these tire dealers. I mean, I almost pulled my hair out when I saw it twice. I couldn't believe it. So they were doing markup. And so I took 10 items. They picked out 10 random items in their store. And we went to Home Depot and Lowe's and shopped the exact same items. Well, guess what? Home Depot and Lowe's were much more expensive. The guys almost dropped their jaws when they saw how much more money Home Depot and Lowe's made on the same product that we were apples to apples with. Exact same brands, by the way. And they said, how does that work? Well, these guys have been doing markup. So if you're out there listening and you do markup or you do things against cost and you're not shopping your markets, you need to. And the rant came about by my last story, and I'm just translating it back into other experiences. So what we found was Home Depot would do a loss leader, or Lowe's would do loss leaders. They'd have flowers for 98 cents that they paid $1 for or $2 for, I don't know. But when you came in and bought the fertilizer and the shovel and everything else, they weren't just marking that up 135 like everybody. They had pricing strategies. So when we secret shopped them as independent hardware stores, we were always way cheaper. Did you hear that? We were way cheaper because we were doing markup. So think about your business and your pricing. Make sure you're not out there. So what happened? How did this rant get started this week? I was on a phone call with my son, and he was really proud, and he had gone out and he had made calls this week, which he has a great business. He's doing well. He's growing, and he's out cold calling or making cold calls on the phone, and he's introduced himself to customers and stuff, and he's telling me about it. And then he tells me about a new dealer he calls on, and they buy used parts, which is what he sells. And I said, well, where do they buy them? And he mentions this company. He says, oh, they buy them from this company called LKQ. And I go, what is LKQ? Are they a competitor to you, like they down the road from you? He goes, oh, no, Dad, they're a bigger company. I said, how big are they? Oh, they're a lot bigger, I think. So I looked them up while he was on the phone. They're publicly traded. They're a used parts company that sells to people exactly what he's doing. They have 50,000 employees worldwide. They do $12 billion in sales. Their EBITDA is $900 million. And he found by asking questions that he was selling his stuff cheaper than they do. Wow, that's competitive out there. He wasn't even getting the calls. The calls that he called on to start calling on to see if he could help them, they were using this LKQ. He wasn't even in the loop. And when he asked him about pricing, he was less. So he found out by starting to call customers that this big company, had great margins, which means he could. And by the way, they were publicly traded. So I downloaded their recent annual report, and I looked through it, and they were even talking about the cottage industry and how they had owned the cottage industry, of which he's in, my son's in. And so I'm laughing, thinking to myself, I go, here we go again. Here we go again. We're all sitting in our vacuum about pricing. We're all sitting in our vacuum, maybe using some industry standard on what our margin should be, but actually our margin could be a lot better. If we go back and we look at these tire dealers and we look at the margins they were complaining about, and then we see the strategy where they were doing markup and they weren't looking at how their competitors, the big successful, mega successful companies were doing it. We look at the hardware group sitting there talking about Home Depot and all these crazy things and Lowe's, and then we find out they're using markup. They're not even they're so much less expensive than Home Depot and Lowe's, and it's their fault. They don't need to be. And then my son's company, he's sitting there. He revelation that he's competing against a company that does $12 billion in sales, and he's cheaper than them. All he's got to do is get out there and be amongst them. He can be much more service oriented and much more intimate with his customers than somebody who has 50,000 employees. Wow, that's competition out there. And I just want to close, that there's a lot of things to think about in your pricing. Don't just do markup, for sure. Strategically price. Do competitive intel work. And I got to tell you, I help a lot of entrepreneurs, and this almost makes my skin crawl. And I tell you, it happens every week. One of them will tell me, you know what, Dean? We're half the price of the big guy. We're going to kick their butt. And I want to go, why would you be half the price of the big guy? Why wouldn't you go at the big guy with the value and stuff and let him be the price leader to help you get your price there with margins? And when you do the analysis of what you leave on the table when you're bragging you're half the price of somebody else, that's like insanity. And then you wonder why you never make money, or you got to raise extra capital, or boy, we're just going to take them apart with price. I promise you, it is not price. It's service. It's response. It's all those things. When people looked at Netflix and they go, oh, Netflix is about price against Blockbuster. No, Netflix came out with a model that made it easy to do business with them. Easy to do business with. Now they have a streaming business. I guarantee you people pay more for their streaming business than they ever did renting those Blockbuster videos. So I want you to think about, after you listen today, go back, look at your pricing strategy. Ask yourself, if you put one more penny on everything, would you lose every deal? And the answer is going to be no. So why are you leaving the penny off? I want you to really think about this. So this week, I want you to really take that deep breath on your pricing. And then if you have any thoughts or ideas, or you want to call me crazy, you can always reach out at help@adjunctceo.com. That's help@adjunctceo.com. Just tell me, Dean, you're crazy. If you want somebody to tail twist you, or somebody, if you've got a company out there and your team's always saying it, email me at help@adjunctceo.com and say, hey, Dean, I need help. I'll come out and help you. I'll look at this thing, absolutely no cost for you. I'll give you some ideas. I'm telling you, it drives me crazy. And this week, my son, who's very successful, he's really doing well. I'm proud of him like you can't imagine. He's an entrepreneur. He's going to have a great business. He's learning along the way. But one thing's for sure, he can't come in front of his dad and get away with stuff that I'm not going to rant about. So for all my listeners out there, you guys have a great week. And remember, oh, my price is not competitive. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this week's show. Subscribe today to our podcast and send questions or thoughts to help@deanacres.com. Also, visit us at www.deanacres.com to listen to prior shows and view helpful videos. Also, great tips to download. Thanks again. See you next week.